Okay, hello. Sorry, I just screwed up and inadvertently ended my broadcast. So, this is, of course, an entirely new stream that people will have to discover, but it's the same subject. RFKJ's position on Medicare for all. Uh, I'm going to have to find this on Facebook and share it on Facebook if you'll give me a moment. Okay, let me share this. Share. Okay. And I hope some other people will share it to me. We'll share it, okay, in YouTube. Anyway, my subject for tonight is, as I just said, doing an analysis and commentary and a friendly critique of RFKJ's position, okay, on Medicare for all. Uh, I'm going to invite some people here. Okay, hang on just a second before I get this started again. Okay, there we go. People looking for this. Okay, so recently there was an episode of Rising where Brianna Joy Gray and Robbie Zoav were interviewing Bobby Kennedy, specifically Robert F. Kennedy Jr., to get his views on various subjects. And during that stream, there was an opportunity for Brianna Joy Gray. It was a rising stream, I should say. And about 29 minutes into that stream, there was an interlude, a dialogue between Brianna Joy Gray and Bobby Kennedy that lasted for 10 minutes. It was a back and forth lasting 10 minutes in which RFKJ stated his views on Medicare for all quite explicitly. So there was a rare opportunity to have a conversation like this for 10 minutes without shifting over to another subject. What I want to do here tonight in this episode of Empowering Democracy, because it is supposed to be Empowering Democracy, this redo, okay, I want to go over those 10 minutes in stop and start fashion and comment on them because they were very revealing and also make a mistake I don't want to see repeated. So here's Robert Copeland. Hi, Robert. I'm sorry I screwed up the first edition of this. Says hi, Joe. Kay says hi, Joe. And Lisa says, hey, nice to see you. Hey, Lisa, wonderful to see you as well. Okay, if you would like But I can send you a StreamYard link to this real quickly, and you can actually come in and interact with me over this interview if you like. Okay. Anyway, just indicate if you'd like to do that. If not, I can go on as is, waiting for Dee to click on this, okay, and get in here. But I'm going to start now sharing the YouTube stream, the Rising stream. I'll start from roughly 29 minutes in. And let me see if I've done this right. I think I have. Yeah, there we are. Okay. I'll start to play it from about 29 minutes in, when Brianna brings up healthcare.
Is repeatedly raised by people, small business owners, et cetera, as one of the largest costs they have when they start a new business. And of course, Medicare for All was such an animating force of the last two Bernie campaigns and really galvanized a lot of previous non-voters and disgruntled Democrats into a movement. You said in a recent interview that you were for Medicare for All in theory, but that you found it, I believe you were something along the lines of politically unlikely, something to that effect. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but it strikes me that some of the other things that you've been fighting for, I think really valiantly, like cutting the military budget, taking on the military industrial complex, are also things which will face intense pushback from the blob, from these deeply entrenched, very well-funded industries. And that being said, given the obstacles to fighting the military-industrial complex, what do you say to progressives who are disappointed that you don't seem to have that same urgency with respect to healthcare, which is repeatedly ranked as such a significant concern for Americans, and Medicare for All in particular, which 88% of Democratic voters support?
Yeah, well, let me answer both, all of your questions. One is just from a practical standpoint, Brianna, in terms of cutting the military budget, it's easier for a president to do than passing a national healthcare program. And a lot of those costs that, the president can do on his own without that much cooperation from Congress.
Okay, so I did want to say something about that statement. It may seem on the surface that it's easier to cut the defense budget, but there are many yahoos, okay, who are in the Congress who will be very unhappy about the cutting of the defense budget. So the way this would work is, what Bobby Kennedy as president would do would be to submit, a budget to Congress. But Congress doesn't have to pass that particular budget. They can add to the defense budget. If Bobby cuts it down to $600 billion, he could still find himself with Congress restoring the cuts, unless, of course, as president, he has a great deal of influence in Congress. But certainly in the Senate, there are going to be many people who will dislike the kind of cut that might be attractive to many of us. So I'm not sure getting defense cuts through is really going to be easier for Bobby Kennedy as president than getting a Medicare for All bill through would be. It might be slightly easier, but off the top of my head, I just don't see it as that much easier. It would be revolutionary unless, of course, a Bobby Kennedy campaign was to change, a lot of opinions and result in the election of new people in Congress who were ready to follow him. So let me go on with this.
And that's why I think of course, you're challenging vested interests that are as powerful as the pharmaceutical industry and the medical cartels. But it's an easier thing. The president does not need to get 51 senators and 250 congressmen on board. And then with Medicare, look,
well, again, the president actually may have to do that if he wants to make deep cuts to the military budget, because he may find that his budget is actually filibustered, and that in order to get that budget actually through Congress, that he may have to do something about the filibuster. So let me go on.
I watched my uncle and fought with him for 50 years trying to get national health care through. And
I want to say something about that 50 years, because he had that experience for 50 years. From his point of view, it seems like it's very disappointing to fight for national health care, because you can lose a lot of your political capital, in actually doing that. If you keep on fighting for it and they keep on rejecting it, it can get more and more difficult to work on other things, because people can get very angry for you, very angry at you when you try to get them to vote on something that they don't want to vote on. So that's something to be considered. He has that very negative experience behind him for a very long time. So I wonder if there's not some fear behind what he's saying now, that if he gets elected as president and he has a lot of political capital, does he really want to make a fight for Medicare for all right away and risk that capital when he has, from his own point of view, so many other important things to do, including the enactment of peace? I mean, he really wants to do that. That's a major purpose of his run for the presidency, is to get us out of the warlike foreign policy that we're in now and change that. And even though he may be very much for Medicare for all in theory, as he's about to say, he may not want to risk his progress in other areas, on that. Let's go forward.
I'm very conscious of the deadlock that he reached. And I am, if it were up to me, I would say we should have Medicare for all right now. The current way of funding Medicare is not of funding healthcare in our country is dysfunctional. What I would advocate is a public option, which will lead ultimately into Medicare for all, but give people individual choice. I'm somebody who is for personal freedom, for personal choice, and I think the public option is more consistent with that belief. And if we,
hello, Lisa.
Hey, Joe, how you doing? Hi, everybody.
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good to be in here with you.
Okay, great to have you in here with me. Okay, so to get back to Robert, because he's worried about the political capital aspect of it. And because of the negative experiences he's had for so many years, and because underlying this is another kind of orientation here, I think. Okay, and that orientation is that if he does get elected, okay, as the president of the United States, he will still have many of the kinds of limitations that other presidents have had. I don't think he's assuming that he's going to have a Congress that will be transformed. In other words, he may make considerable gains in Congress, of course, but he's probably assuming that a lot of the old leaders are going to be there. That, for example, on the Democratic side, Hakeem Jeffries, he may think, is still going to be the Speaker of the House. And Hakeem Jeffries is very much bought by healthcare, industrial complex people. And so he may be looking at a political situation like this. And because he's looking at that, he doesn't really want to go for Medicare for all. He wants to go for a compromise position of some sort. And as you just saw, in the video, he began to talk about the public option. Let's go back a few seconds on that.
So, and then, with Medicare, look, I watched my uncle and fought with him for 50 years trying to get national health care through. And so, and I'm very conscious of the deadlock that he reached. And I am, if it were up to me, I would say we should have Medicare for all right now. The current way of funding Medicare is not worth of funding healthcare in our country is dysfunctional. What I would advocate is a public option, which will lead ultimately into Medicare for all, but give people individual choice.
Okay, what I'd like to say about this, and Lisa, feel free to come in, at any time.
Mm-hmm. I know.
What I'd like to say about this is that the movement from the advocacy for Medicare for all to the advocacy for the public option, of course, has happened before in 2009 and 2010. The public option was blown out of the water by opposition to it, in Congress, by the healthcare, industrial complex and their control over people in Congress. And what we ended up with was the Affordable Care Act. I don't know how involved that Bobby was in that particular conflict, but I was very involved from a blogging point of view from day to day in 2009, in 2010. And I remember the bait and switch that characterized the fight for the public option. One reason for the bait and switch is that one reason why I say a bait and switch was that the original proposal for a public option was by Hacker, but Jacob Hacker, who, if I recall correctly, was a professor at Stanford, at that time. And he devised a proposal that envisioned something like 130 million people being a part of the public option plan. It was to be a giant plan with all kinds of people in it, and that plan would have considerable market power to compete with the private insurance companies. And as Hacker originally envisioned it, it would only be a matter of time until we saw a transition to Medicare for all because of the market power which the public option would have. Now, the bait and switch idea comes in because that was the idea that was being circulated in the spring of 2009. But then it got into the Congress, and what Nancy Pelosi came out with, well, actually, it was, I believe, the Ways and Means Committee that finally came out with a version of the public option that was really minuscule. That plan was projected to cover only 10 million people. And of course, a plan with only 10 million people in it would have a limited network, of doctors and limited attractiveness, and would only have made a very limited impact anyway. But even that very limited plan was too much for the healthcare industrial complex. It was too much for the pharmaceutical industry, and they brought out all their big guns, and they wouldn't allow that plan to come to a vote. And after fighting for months over it, in other words, the plan came out of committee in June of 2009. And by December of 2009, that plan, the public option plan, was dead. And it looked like healthcare reform was entirely dead, as well. And later we'll talk about what happened to it, at that time. But the bait and switch comes because the public option term is vague, and ambiguous. It can cover a whole range of different plans that include some sort, of public option. So when Bobby says that he's for the public option, we don't really have a clear picture of what he's for. He could be talking about a plan like the Jacob Hacker plan. He could be talking a plan like the one that came out of Congress in June of 2009 that wouldn't have been large enough to compete with a mouse, and certainly wouldn't have been sufficiently large to compete with the large insurance companies.
Hey, Joe, can I jump in here for a sec?
Please.
Okay, so you're absolutely correct. I just want to add a little bit of detail here. Not in this discussion, I don't think, but in other discussions that he has had, other interviews that he's had. He talks about where the ACA went wrong, which is that they did not allow the government to negotiate with pharma, and they also did not steer appropriately pricing for services, putting limits on what they could charge, right? And the reason that happened, and the reason that everybody was so disappointed when there was any public option available in the ACA, is because that ability to compete, to show that the public option would be the most effective way to spend dollars and get people the care they needed, et cetera, that would have driven the insurance industry out, right? I mean, that was the whole point initially in doing a public option, was that it would keep pricing and negotiations for drug prices in check, because they would have to have competed with the public option, which the government would have been able to negotiate drug prices and put caps on spending, what they could charge people in premiums, et cetera, et cetera. That's why they killed it, Joe. And the lobby now in this situation here is, so, I mean, they have a lock on all of it, right?
Yes.
So coming back in with a public option, undefined. I mean, he doesn't have a policy platform put in place yet because right now he's just trying to get everybody to start paying attention to him. But if you're going to try to put something through now, realistically, and I know a lot of people aren't going to like to hear this, but healthcare, revamping healthcare right now, nobody holding office, nobody who is, elected is going to stick their neck out on that. And we know this because we've seen it. We've seen it happen over the last couple of years. It is not politically expedient for people to do that, which is ridiculous because 80% of the public now supports Medicare for all in some shape or form. But the politicians know that if they go against the pharmaceutical lobby and the insurance lobby and the equity now you've got all kinds of corporate investment in healthcare, that they will not get reelected, and the leadership is not going to allow them to do it.
Right. Okay. So the point is, that analysis, okay, which you just gave me, is also based on the idea that there won't be many changes in Congress. That after the election of 2024, we'll have a Congress that will be very similar to the one, okay, that we have now, full of people not willing to stick their neck out to go for Medicare, but for all. Okay, what I'll start to say at this point, and probably will say much more about, is that that's not necessarily the case. It may not be necessarily the case because there are movements around the country for Medicare for all. The Red Berets movement, of which we are both a part, okay, is very much for Medicare for all, of course, and is continuing to organize. And these days, okay, is organizing around a documentary called Healing Us. It's possible the documentary is going to take off. Okay, I think we lost Lisa for a moment anyway, but yeah, you're back. Good. Okay, so it may be the movement for Medicare for all is going to take off again because of outside efforts of many of us who are very much for this movement. But the real important point here is whether it takes off again will depend in part, okay, on what Bobby Kennedy decides to do. If he decides to run, okay, on Medicare for all, and right now, obviously, he's decided to not run, okay, on Medicare for all, to take, kind of a hands-off position, saying that it's good in theory, but the real practical thing to do, okay, is a public option. Okay, so it seems that he is leaving it, okay, to the movements to try to build something strong for Medicare for all in the run-up to the 2024 election. But if he were to get behind it, then it might be an entirely different situation. It might be much more like the election of 2018, where the Democrats who were running were all saying that they wanted Medicare for all. And of course, that election was a very successful one for Democrats, okay, at that time. How much more successful would that have been if it had taken place in 2020 and the Democratic candidate for president was behind, okay, a Medicare for all program, instead of saying that if Medicare for all reached his desk, he would veto it. Okay, at least that's not something, okay, that Bobby Kennedy is saying. Let's go on to see something more about what he's saying to get a better feel for this.
I'm somebody who is for personal freedom, for personal choice. And I think the public option is more consistent with that belief. And if we can make a public option that, for example, would charge a maximum of 8% of people's income rather than the 20% that they're paying today.
Okay, I wanted to say something about that too. There's the issue of choice, of course, which he brings up. That is a very, very important issue. We have to raise the question, choice, okay, of what? What he's talking about here apparently is choice of insurance companies, either the public option, which would be constituted probably as a public corporation of some sort. Okay, so that would be, okay, an insurance company. And then all the other insurance companies competing with the public option. So the question in my mind is, who wants a choice of insurance companies? What people want is a choice of providers, a choice, okay, of doctors, okay, a choice, okay, of hospitals. Under Medicare for all, almost all the doctors would be in the program because they would have to be, because there wouldn't be any other competing insurance companies. There would be concierge doctors, of course, so not every doctor would be involved in it, but most doctors, if they wanted to make a living, would have to conform to Medicare for all, would have to deal with that particular program. And by the way, there would be a lot less work for them in dealing with that particular program than there would be in having to deal with multiple insurance companies and a public option company, okay, as well. So they would save lots, okay, of paperwork.
You know, Joe, when they were first talking about a public option, and this was one of the ideas batted around, but it was literally that you could buy into Medicare, right, as your option, which, by the way, was um, one of the things that Bernie had floated when he was talking on his first release of Medicare for All, which was that he would open it up to people being allowed to buy in tranches and whatnot. And
Yes.
the truth of the matter is that if we did it that way, if it was done that way, it would be very easy to push the insurance companies out. And if there are people out in this country who want their insurance, I mean, let's just be honest. There is a percentage of people, whether they're real or not, we'll find out real quick, that are adamant that they want their health insurance.
Yes.
Okay, fine. But you're not going to be able to compete with a situation where you have negotiated prices, negotiated caps on how much people are going to have to spend. You know, the ultra wealthy individuals in this country, it's not a make or break thing for them. It's like something like the audacity of wealth, right? The elasticity of wealth, right? Someone who's incredibly wealthy, they don't give a darn if their grocery bill has gone up 75%, because to them it's a de minimis expense in the grand scheme of things. Whereas lots of people who aren't incredibly wealthy, it really matters that your grocery bill's up 75%, right? So I don't listen. I'm, you know me. I am a red beret. I have been a healthcare advocate. I know this stuff inside and out. I'm disgusted with how this has all gone. But I can tell you that politically, right now, with the Congress that we have, with the stranglehold that the industry has on legislators, and the palette out there, one of the most effective ways to destabilize the insurance industry would be to do a public option where you're buying into Medicare.
Yes, I would like to say a few words about that. I basically agree. But I want to welcome Dee Pierce.
Hi,
Okay.
Dee.
But,
Hi, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you too.
but Dee, we're here in part because I screwed up and I ended my stream within 30 seconds. And then I went to this other stream, and that's why you weren't able to initially find that.
Okay.
Okay, I did put a StreamYard link to this, okay, in the chat that we normally use. I suppose that's the link that you used in order to come in. But
Yes, I
anyway,
did.
we're very glad that you're here. Okay, and also please comment. Okay, what we're doing is we're going through 10 minutes of a rising stream, okay, from I guess about a week ago or so. Where Brianna Joy Gray was basically interviewing Bobby Kennedy by herself. In other words, her partner was there, okay, Robbie Zoav, but he allowed her to interrogate RFKJ for 10 minutes, and it produced a very, very interesting conversation, okay, between the two of them. And we're extracting Bobby Kennedy's view about this, but from that conversation. So we had gotten to the point where Bobby had said that he was not for Medicare for all. He was for it in theory, but as a matter of practice, okay, in practicality, he was for, okay, a public option. But we noticed that he did not say what kind of public option he was for. And we also pointed out that the term, okay, public option, is an extremely vague term. And back in 2009 and 2010, some of us used to call it the public option trick sparkle pony, because people would use that comment, would use that particular term, and it could mean anything. And okay, as Bobby uses it here, okay, it could mean anything. We talked about the Jacob Hacker public option plan, okay, that was envisioned to include 130 million people. And then there was the Nancy Pelosi plan that came out of the Congress in June of 2009 that would include only 10 million people. And Lisa just pointed to yet a third plan that for many people, the public option meant that what you do is you offer Medicare coverage to people, and that's okay, your public option. And that would be, of course, an entirely different public option. Okay, and also mainly, okay, a very good one. I have to say, going back to 2010, okay, and remembering, okay, the debates, okay, of that time, that the idea of creating a public option by offering Medicare to people was one I originally heard from Alan Grayson. He made that particular proposal in the fall of 2009 when the public option was stalled, okay, in Congress. So he put out, okay, a new version. And yes, it was one that was liked by Bernie Sanders at the time and by Dennis Kucinich at the time. And we have to note that Dennis is now
As
the
his
campaign
campaign manager.
manager
Yes,
for Bobby Kennedy. So that's kind of wonderful. Would you like to make any comment about that at this point?
Oh boy, going down memory lane again. And I have to say, a friend of mine, Anita Stewart, she's working with the campaign. She was with the Kucinich campaign years ago.
And now she's with the RFKJ campaign.
Yes, she is. She's
Oh.
very excited. But then a lot of times in the end, she ended up voting Green Party because things don't pan out the way, she would want it to pan out.
sure.
But
Okay, so let's go back to what RFKJ is saying at this point. Let me get control of this again.
If we can make that option work, and if we can make it attractive to Americans, you will naturally evolve it into Medicare for all. But you'll do it.
Okay, so what I wanted to say about that was that he mentions paying 8%, okay, for the coverage, a public option plan where people would pay 8%, okay, of their income. I just wanted to introduce in here the idea that if a couple makes $100,000 per year, okay, then 8% of $100 is $8,000. If you divide that by 12, that's $666 per month. Okay, let's assume that you're living in Los Angeles or New York, okay, or San Francisco. $666 a month for health care is still a considerable amount to pay. In other words, it's still a burden, okay, especially compared to Medicare for all, which would cost, okay, extremely little. So, okay, I had to point that out. That might still be a plan that people would not get very excited about and would not really support strongly. Whereas if you ran, okay, on Medicare for all and went on it very, very strong, people can get really excited about that because it's free at the point of service. There's no copays. There's no deductibles. The premiums would perhaps be relatively small, depending upon how they choose to fund the plan. It could even be funded in such a way that the premiums would be nothing. So the whole idea of looking at Medicare for all from a political point of view is that it is something that can be extremely attractive, and it can really really boost your campaign if you make it extremely attractive. When you downgrade it to a public option plan, what you do is reduce the attractiveness of it,
But
and
people aren't going to go for that.
you make people much less excited about it. Okay, I also want to say something about this, okay, in relation to the complexity of the bill, okay, itself. Okay, the Medicare for all bills are relatively simple. The current bill is something like 130 pages, okay, or something like that. Okay, that's nothing compared to the original public option bill, which came out of the Congress, the Nancy Pelosi bill that she favored. That was a 1,300-page bill. The eventual, the size of the bill for the Affordable Care Act, when it finally passed, was something like 2,100 pages. What does that mean? It means people who are politically active can't even read the bill.
Let alone understand it.
Hard for them to read a 1,300-page bill and to understand it. It's much easier to read the 130-page bill. But even that, okay, is a little complex. John Conyers' bill, H.R. 676, that was only 35 pages. Anybody could read that, okay, and understand it. And that made it very attractive because it made it hard to lie about the bill, which, of course,
And
opponents were going to do. They're going to lie. So one of the aspects in making a bill attractive is to make the benefits very, very good, to make the cost for you getting health care extremely good, but also to make the bill really simple so people can understand it. And you wouldn't get that from most of the public option bills. You might get it if you just provided a public option, which was an option to get into Medicare coverage. that could be done very simply. Okay, and it could also be done in such a way that you could subsidize up to a certain level.
Exactly, Joe. Now you're talking.
Right. So people would be paying hardly anything to get the Medicare coverage. And it seems to me also that kind of bill could more easily transition into the Medicare for all bill that Bobby, okay, is for. Okay, but it seems to
But we
me,
don't know what this bill is going to look like. He never said that he never gave enough specifics yet. We can't make that assumption. When he says public option, unless he came right out and said allowing people to buy into Medicare, we really don't know where he's going with it, but he does say that it would exacerbate into everybody Medicare for all, which makes me think that he is actually talking about opening up Medicare.
if he's talking about that, that could certainly be the case. But also, if you recall, Jacob Hacker, his 130 million person plan had the objective of transitioning to a Medicare for all plan. But his view of it was that that particular insurance plan would be so powerful that it would drive the private insurers, simply out of business in a very few years. That's what his transition idea, was based upon, and that was a weakness of that plan. But from a political point of view, because the industry mobilized against it and
Right.
got Congress at first to come out with a minuscule plan, the 10 million person plan. And then when nobody got excited about that, it was relatively easy to kill it, okay, in Congress, leaving us with Nancy Pelosi's final effort to get the Affordable Care Act through, which was basically the Heritage Foundation Republican plan that had been implemented, okay, in Massachusetts, okay, when Romney was the governor, of Massachusetts. Okay, going
Well,
on.
and it's important to point some couple things out too, is that if let's just say, let's keep this simple where people would actually be able to buy into Medicare, right?
Yes,
And let's say that, I mean, if you take 100,000 people in the US and give them that option to buy into Medicare, right? You already are subsidizing the insurance companies per person for the coverage. So you just take those 100,000 people's subsidies and you give them directly to those individuals, which would take the cost down. Perfect world, right? The question then would be, who gets the option at first to buy in? Because if you only got 100,000 slots, right, you've got to come up with, well, who gets that option to buy in there? And one of the things that I have always been dead set against a public option in this current environment where the ACA is entrenched is that my knowledge of where we're coming from and where the Democrats are and have been for, since they passed the ACA on any type of an overhaul would be, if the insurance companies allowed them to do it, what you were going to be getting is they were going to dump the most expensive folks into that plan, which would force it into a situation where it was going to bankrupt itself because it couldn't afford to sustain. I mean, part of an insurance pool is a true insurance pool where you have healthy people paying in to cover for those that are sick, right? So there's a lot of nuances here. I will say this. I love the idea that he's talking about this. He doesn't have a policy per se. I'm assuming that that's going to have to come down the road. The Democrats would be really smart on this subject to enter into this quote unquote debate with him from the standpoint of, with 88% of voters wanting Medicare for all, you know, they can make hay out of that all day long, that he's talking about a public option. I just think that what he is doing, and I've listened to just about everything that comes out on him because I'm very interested. He's holding his cards very close to his chest. He's not leading with bills, right? He's talking about uniting the country. He's talking about, you know, how he is going to pull us out of war, how he plans on reining in the security state immediately, how he would change the fact that the Patriot Act has been misused, big things that everybody on both sides of the aisle and in the middle are very interested in. He's a candidate, in my opinion, who's got a hell of a lot of substance, but when the rubber hits the road, right, you got to get a platform. You got to put a platform together, and we're just not there yet.
Yes, I do agree with that. But of course, the point of this stream, or part of the point of this stream, but anyway, is to show the need for Bobby to clarify what he means by a public option, and to show us what the features of such a program could be. I know, okay, it's fairly early, but it perhaps, okay, is not too early to point out that that has to be done, okay, at some point, because during the fight um, uh, for the reform of the healthcare system in 2009 and 2010, it was never really made clear what a public option was. They
Exactly.
kept on
Agree.
talking about public option, public option. But Kip Sullivan wrote a very, very good paper, okay, at that time, uh, which characterized the public option as a bait and switch thing. And he was quite right. He did great analysis in that, but showing how, okay, unless the public option were to hit, okay, a critical mass, it would always be driven out of business by the private sector companies. Okay, that
And
paper
you know something?
was a
The
very influential paper.
the private option just puts a bad taste in people's mouths. The public option. It's just horrible memories from all of that. And no one wants that. And you could try to explain it and explain things all you want, but it just doesn't excite people. People want the Medicare for all, and that's where he should be going. But I think he's trying to transition because of the insurance companies.
To follow on with that thought, which I think is quite a good one, uh, when you start to explain the complexities of a public option program, people tend to turn off, okay, because you're getting, okay, into details about what kind of people will be eligible and what kind of people, okay, are not going to be eligible. There's sort of the whole flavor, okay, of inequality about that, and segmenting the public into groups as opposed to bringing them together. One of the big advantages of Medicare for All is that you bring everybody together into the same program, rich, okay, or poor. Doesn't matter who you are. You get the good service from, okay, a Medicare for All type of program. That's one of the attractive things about it. That's one of the exciting things about it. I do want to add something which we've been, kind of around the edges with it. With Bobby's overall orientation on trying to unite people, trying to get the country to come together again, I do think that's a very important aspect of things. Okay, but I would point out that with the polls we're seeing, okay, on Medicare for All, something like 88% of Democratic voters, primary voters, more than 50%, okay, of the Republican voters, and the biggest group of all, the independent voters, clocking in at roughly 70%, you are talking, okay, about a bill that at the base level of people will unite the country. Now, it may not be uniting people, okay, among the elites, because so many of them are profiting from the present situation, of disunity. But I think what Bobby is implying here is that somehow Medicare for all is controversial. It is controversial, okay, among the elites in the United States. It's controversial. But
Well, and above and in even our own progressives are saying, well, Medicare for all is not going to happen, right? I mean, we have to be honest about this. He's going to come into a Congress where, if he's going to do this, he needs to write his own bill.
okay, if he's going to do this, he does need to write, okay, his own bill. I agree with that. I don't think that's a real big deal.
No, it's not. But I don't know that I don't know how deep he is into healthcare per se. He understands Medicare. That's why
Well,
I think that
he says that he was fighting with Kenny for 50 years to get it passed. So he
right
must have
to
some
get
knowledge of
Medicare for
details
all
okay, of the
passed.
bill.
Yes, and
Okay.
he's big on antitrust, Joe, and that's the other thing. Here I go again. A big crux of what's wrong with the ACA is that it just obliterated antitrust. And he's big on antitrust, just as big on that as he is on civil liberties and free speech and the First Amendment and.
He is.
So it depends on what happens in the state, who's going to work for him, who's going to hit the ground with him, and what are they going to want from him, right? There's going to be a ground game, and I think he'd be malleable as heck on this, especially with Kucinich running his campaign.
Yes, I agree with that. That he's likely to be very malleable about that. I don't really doubt that at all.
I'm just going to go off camera for a couple minutes, but I'm still here. I'll be talking.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to go on. Go back to Bobby again for some more words. Okay.
Do it through a process of choice and evolution rather than imposing it on people with a lot of hostility, which is just practically impossible to do, as you probably understand. And I understand because I was involved in the healthcare battle for so long.
Well, can you
The
speak
biggest-
Okay, so there, okay, I have to say that I don't agree that if you pass, okay, a Medicare for all bill, that it enforces something on people that's really distasteful. Okay, in other words, what you're doing is you're no longer giving people a free choice, okay, of insurance companies. Yes, you're taking away the free choice, okay, of insurance companies, but in return, you're giving them the free choice, okay, of the providers. And I think that is what, okay, they really want. So I don't think the passage of Medicare for all is going to be a time of hostility, okay, for people, or is going to be something that's going to be met with a great deal of hostility, like the Affordable Care Act was. Okay. I think it's going to be the opposite. I mean, I think it's going to be a time of celebration for people, okay, if Medicare for all were to pass.
I've been thinking about this now for years, and kind of put it down for a little bit and then picked it back up now that it's back on the table, and been thinking about it. One of the things that I don't think us as staunch healthcare policy, Medicare for all supporters truly understand, but I am becoming more and more aware of this, and I think it's valuable for people just to understand where other folks are coming from. The sheer volume of jobs in this country that are associated with healthcare, all of those people whose livelihoods are working for the healthcare industry, you put the fear of God in them when you talk about eliminating the insurance companies, because you're eliminating their livelihood. And not that that's a good thing. Again, I think we all know that if we went to a Medicare for all for everyone, our health insurance costs would go down, our health care would go up, our health would improve dramatically. But we're not the ones, per se, that are working. Like in Pittsburgh, 60% of the people that live in the city work for the health insurance industry, right? And
Uh,
that's something that I'm trying. I was bullheaded and I never wanted to hear it, but now that, with time comes more information and hopefully a little bit of wisdom, I'm more aware of why people, even though it's better for them to go this way for their health care, are so damn scared of it because it's their livelihoods.
right. Okay. I understand the livelihood question. I understand as well that there are 3 million people that are dependent on the healthcare industry for jobs. About 650,000 are directly in the industry, but the rest are dependent on it, okay, in some way because of secondary, okay, and tertiary effects of the 650,000 people having those jobs.
Oh, Joe, there's way more than 650,000 people involved in healthcare.
Uh,
Way more.
but last time I looked, there were 600. I'm not talking about healthcare, okay, because remember, all the people, okay, involved in provider work would still have their jobs. We're talking about the people involved in the insurance companies. And I believe that estimate of 650,000, okay, is roughly a correct estimate. It's on that scale, okay, anyway. Okay.
Oh, I bet there's more than 650,000 billers in the US of A billing insurance.
I don't know about those who are billing insurance. I am saying, you'll notice that there are 3 million people, okay, who are relying on the industry for jobs in some way because of the secondary, okay, and tertiary effects. I don't know where the category of billers actually fits into that. But anyway, to go further with this, I do think it's important to point out, okay, that a Medicare for All program would involve a great expansion, okay, of Medicare jobs. Okay, and it's been estimated uh, as far back as 2009 and 2010 that one half of the people that were then employed, okay, in insurance companies would have been able to go over to the government program and get jobs, okay, in that particular program.
Sure. And all of this was covered in Bernie's bill, right? Like a just transition and all of it. And again, without a bill, we're all speculation here. But the one thing that I do also want to point out is that if he's talking about giving people choice, then state-based single payer would be included in that, I would think.
It might very well be. And of course, we would be pleased if there were state based programs that were part of the public option idea that he's stating, okay, at this point. But we do have to wait for the details, okay, in order to see this.
A
Uh,
candidate that's talking about healthcare reform right now is huge. That's not
yes,
Sanders.
I do agree with that, but I point out that Marianne Williamson is also talking about healthcare. Okay, and of course, uh, so is uh, Cornell West.
Right.
So we have three candidates who are talking healthcare now, and that is okay. Huge, and hopefully we might see more candidates who are talking about that as well. Okay, but let's uh, go further. Okay, in the interview because Bobby is starting to emphasize the importance of choice. Okay, and he's getting into some of his notions about how important the free market is for certain things. So let's sort of check that out.
Specifically to
And
what you think
I think
yeah,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
we need to think of it. I think we need to think, because we have to acknowledge these deadlocks, acknowledge these practical obstacles, and we have to think in terms of ways to unify Americans in ways that will reduce the overall cost of healthcare. The healthcare costs now in this country are 4.3 trillion. That is far higher per capita than any other country on earth. We pay much more than anybody, double or triple what people pay per capita in Europe or Canada, and our healthcare outcomes are 79th in the world. We're behind Mongolia, we're behind Cuba, we're behind Costa Rica in healthcare outcomes. And one
So that segment is very important because it shows he knows certain very important things about what's going on, in other countries. He knows how much we're spending uh, on healthcare. But what I missed there was a statement. Okay, Lisa stepped away for a minute. Uh, was a statement of how much we might save if we went into a Medicare for All program. Okay. The estimates that I have recently been running with is that when the program settled down, we would save 50% of total national healthcare expenditures. So instead of spending 4.3 trillion last year, we would have spent only 2.15 trillion. The other 2.15 trillion dollars would have remained in private sector pockets, not in the insurance company pockets. Okay, so I think that that's a key thing he at least should have mentioned, to be fair, because that's one of the big advantages, of Medicare for All.
I think too that it is important to point out that he is talking about a free market, and if people start to realize that it's going to save them a bunch of money to get onto Medicare for all, then the free market that he is idealizing would work.
I'm sorry, the free market that he's idealizing will what?
It would work.
Okay. The free markets, are an idealization. They're not a reality, and generally, over a long period of time, even a fairly brief period of time, they're not really sustainable because they tend towards creating the economic kind, of oligarchy. And so, when he says the free market, first thing I think of is, well, what does he mean by free market? He's got to know there is no such thing as a free market. And what also is implied is that he does know that because
of the problems, one of the reasons for that,
he's very heavily into regulation. Okay, so he must know that to have anything resembling a free market, you have to have your regulation first. So that's
Correct.
almost,
It sounds like crony capitalism otherwise.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I said it sounds like crony capitalism when you say free market.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not suggesting that he wants to have crony capitalism. I
No,
think,
he doesn't. He doesn't. But when he uses that term free market, where it's a
uh,
free for all.
yes, it can make people think of that,
Yes.
and that is anyway. What I'm raising here is that we need to know what he means by free market, and he's not being very
Exactly. We
clear
need to
about it
know.
here. So,
or so on.
Well, can you
The
speak
biggest problem,
specifically to
and
what you think
I think
the yeah,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
we need to think of it. I think we need to think, because we have to acknowledge these deadlocks, acknowledge these practical obstacles, and we have to think in terms of ways to unify Americans in ways that will reduce the overall cost of healthcare. The healthcare costs now in this country are 4.3 trillion. That is far higher per capita than any other country on earth. We pay much more than anybody, double or triple what people pay per capita in Europe or Canada, and our healthcare outcomes are 79th in the world. We're behind Mongolia, we're behind Cuba, we're behind Costa Rica in healthcare outcomes. And one of the problems, one of the reasons for that, probably the principal reason, in fact, the principal reason is chronic disease epidemic. We have the highest burden of chronic disease of any nation in the world. Why is that? Why can't we eliminate it? We know that it comes from environmental exposures. Why aren't we doing the science to identify what those exposures are and to eliminate them? That will eliminate a huge chunk of our healthcare costs and give us a lot more elasticity and flexibility in the way that we allocate those costs to, different actors within the system, which is really what you're doing when you switch from HMOs to Medicare for all.
Yeah, Mr. Kennedy, I do just want to push back and say that I think, for one, the continued presence of a private healthcare system undermines some of the savings that come through a Medicare for all style system by letting people opt out in a way that diminishes the pool that the costs are spread over. So that's one concern people have with that. But more specifically, you're such a vocal and persuasive critic of industry capture and the ways and the kinds of corruption that cause there to be such a disconnect between what the average American wants. 88% of Democrats and a slim majority, but a majority of Republicans all support Medicare for all. So when you look at Congress and say, well, Congress won't pass it, even though the constituents in those congressional districts want it, I think that what people are looking for is a leader, a president who exposes the extent to which elected representatives are not, in fact, representing the interests of their people, and that they feel pressure, therefore, to start to do that. And when they hear a presidential candidate saying, well, there are these obstacles, and so we're going to take another track, it makes some people ask, well, when are we ever going to get that Medicare for all? Yes, we have chronic disease, we have these other issues, but how long are people supposed to subsist and suffer and have medical debt and die, while we know overwhelming majorities of Americans all want one solution, and it is elected representatives, including many of those in the Democratic Party, that are standing in the way?
okay, so of course, I thought that was a very good response to him. Okay, and I agree with much of it. Okay, but what I also wanted to point out, okay, was that when he brings up the chronic disease idea and doing more research on that and discovering why we have that kind of problem and lowering costs when we find out what's causing that problem and we solve that problem, I'm completely down with him on that. But he seems to be implying here that this is an alternative choice of a situation that we can really cut costs extremely low if we take care of the chronic disease problem. So he's offering us a strong program to handle that problem, but a weak program to handle, the universal healthcare problem. And what immediately leaps into my mind is, why can't we have both? If we can cut down the cost of total healthcare spending from 4.3 trillion to 2.2 trillion just by passing Medicare for all, maybe if we solve the chronic disease program, we might even be able to get to something like 1.3 trillion in total healthcare expenses. In other words, why is this an either or? Why isn't it a both and? So I had actually that particular thought, but I also thought that Brianna Joy Gray really put him on the spot there, calling attention to people suffering, and dying, and having all kinds of problems because there isn't a Medicare for all program. So, of course, I think we're all very anxious to see how he is going to respond to that. So.
Brianna, I agree with virtually everything that you say. The issue is that I've been in the trenches for 50 years fighting on this issue, and it's an issue that is because of what we're dealing with in Congress and elsewhere. It's entrenched. It's a source of polarization, and I feel like I need to look at ways of solving this that are actually practical. So I would like to get to the same place you are, which is Medicare for all. But I think the path to doing that, and if you remember, Brianna, when Obamacare got passed, there was there were a lot of problems with it. There were a lot of glitches with it that made people very, very angry about it for the first 2 or 3 years. And then those glitches were slowly worked out. And the option that I'm proposing, which is to begin with the public option, will allow the glitches to be worked out in advance so that ultimately, when and if we get to Medicare for all, we won't have those times where people really get harmed by the implementation of a new system. So,
Okay, to me, that's a false analogy. Because the public option program is going to be different from, a Medicare for all program. It's going to have different kinds, of glitches. Why should we believe that the glitches that are worked out to make the public option program a successful program will be the same glitches that we'll find when we shift over to Medicare for all? Furthermore,
And we already have a Medicare program, so it's not like we don't have anything to base it on.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And the truth is that the glitches we have right now in the Medicare, the regular Medicare program, are glitches that have been introduced by attempts at trying to privatize the program. The changes made but during the Bush administration, the further development of Medicare Advantage programs under Obama, the new CMMI programs, where we have, the Accountability Care Organization, the type of program with its reach, extension, that are causing the private companies to be able to loot the so-called trust fund. I say so-called because it's not a trust fund. It's not a fund of money. That's sitting anywhere. It's just an accounting record. But okay, the point is, the balance in that accounting record is going down much faster because of the ACO by REACH type of program that was introduced recently by CMMI.
Mhm.
Okay? So these attempts to privatize the program and create a neoliberal element in the program, that's something that has to be ended, and I would like to see Bobby Kennedy speak to that. I think that's very important. Going on with what he's saying. Have you got any further comment on that, Lisa?
I am having a heck of a lot of difficulty with this damn router in this house that I'm living in right now. So I apologize if you can't hear me very well. But I think that the way that he attacks all of the other issues that he talks about are data supported, and he's very comfortable with them. I know that he has the ability to come up with something that would make a hell of a lot of sense here. I just don't think that he doesn't have a platform yet. He doesn't have bills.
Yeah. What I'm afraid of here is that the 50 years of experience in this area have made him afraid of wanting to take on uh, the health industrial complex. And that because of that, he's trying to find, uh, uh, another way around. But I have to point out, the following. This is from history. Harry Truman tried a national health service, and he was beaten when he tried to pass that. The Reader's Digest attack, tore him to pieces on that. He had to withdraw from that. And then there was Lyndon Johnson, who at first wanted a Medicare for All program, but felt he wasn't going to be able to get it through Congress. So he retreated to the Medicare program that we more or less have now, at least the precursor to the problem that we have now. Then we go to Jimmy Carter, and Teddy Kennedy. They started fighting with each other, and they weren't able to come to agreement, on any program, and nothing got a floor vote. I'm sorry, I forgot. At first, there was Nixon, and Teddy Kennedy, who couldn't come to agreement, on a Medicare for All program. Then there was Jimmy Carter, and Teddy Kennedy, who weren't able to come to agreement, on a program. What I'm trying to say is, we have never had floor votes for a Medicare for All program. When the Clintons came into office, they tried their variation of something different that would be more acceptable to the health industrial complex, and they got shot down. And then we go to Obama, and he comes in with a public option program, and that gets shot down. As small as it eventually was, it's also shot down. He refused to put H.R. 676 on the table and to run with that because, of course, he had been bought by the insurance companies beforehand. So what I'm saying is there hasn't been anyone who was in a position to get a Medicare for All bill to the floor to see whether it would pass, or not. It's not simply that Medicare for All bills have been voted down in the past. It's that they've never really been put on the floor for a vote. And he, as the president of the United States, would probably have the opportunity to get a floor vote on that if he was supporting Medicare for all. And if he ran on Medicare for all, the support from the public would be overwhelming for him because he was running on that. And if that was one of the reasons why he got elected, he would be able to get a bill put on the floor, because in the process of his campaign, he would be changing the very Congress that now serves as a block to what he wants to do. So he has to say, I love it in theory, but in practice, it's impossible. What I'm saying here is he's in a position to change the system and make it possible. I think we need him to do that. Any comments? Then I'll go on with it.
No, I would say that's my best answer to you. I want the same thing that you want. I believe most Americans that want it. I think, listen, my uncle, I can't tell you the number of times that I was in Senate caucus meetings with him, in his office, talking to people campaigning across the country, pointing out that this was the only country in the world, we're the only industrialized country in the world where people can work their entire lives and have their savings wiped out by a single illness, catastrophic illness. This is the only country in the world, industrialized country, where parents can sit in a living room and listen to their baby crying in the room next door and have to wonder whether that baby is $50 sick or $100 sick, $500 sick before they bring him to a hospital, and then have to make really difficult choices. And it's unfair. It's wrong. We should have Medicare for all in this country. The obstacle that I just recognize as somebody who is trying to deal with issues pragmatically is that it is, it's a, to put it mildly, a heavy lift.
Want to be respectful of your time, of course, so this will be the last question, but just...
Okay, so that's it. I think in that last and final statement, first of all, you hear the stress that he feels about this, because he feels the plight of people who are suffering, who are dying, who cannot get the health care they need. I think the statement he made there shows that he's really up on the issue in terms of the negative aspects of it. But he also isn't using his feelings about that and his knowledge about it to decide to run on that, to try to change it. Now, I have to say that we know very well that if he were to run on that, he would get a tremendous amount of opposition from the healthcare industry. But he's going to get a tremendous amount of opposition from the healthcare industry anyway. I mean, if he's running on the public option, he's going to get a tremendous amount of a tremendous amount of opposition from the healthcare industry. Okay, so why does he think it would be harder to get a victory if he was running on Medicare for all than it would be if he was running on the public option, which he's already said that he would like, to implement. To me, it makes no sense.
Well, I'm going to just throw this out there. He is on both sides. He's trying to talk to everyone. He's obviously done that all over on all the issues that he's bringing up here. And it could very well be that he's hearing from people that, there's a lot of people on the right that do not like the idea of what they consider, being thrown into a standardized healthcare plan, and that might have something to do with it.
Yes, it could. That could have something to do with it. Did you have another comment, Dee?
Yeah, yeah, he's just trying to speak to all audiences. But in the end, you're going to have to really speak to the people that are behind you, that are with you.
Okay, there are many people who might be with him anyway, okay, even if he isn't for, okay, a Medicare for All plan, because certainly he can outline a public option plan that will seem like, okay, an improvement and will get people who like him anyway for other reasons to probably go along in the hopes that he would come around to by supporting, okay, a Medicare for All plan, or at least would allow it to get a floor vote, okay, in Congress. Uh, uh, he may feel that way. He's a very attractive candidate, okay, on many other issues, okay, on the regulatory issues, of course, okay, on the peace issue. Okay, he's the only person who really sounds like he might be able to change, okay, our foreign policy so we get off the ruinous course, okay, that we're on uh, uh, at this point. I have to say, I don't think that Cornel West could be as successful in dealing with Congress, okay, as Bobby Kennedy can be. I don't feel, okay, that Marianne Williamson can be as successful in dealing with Congress, okay, as Bobby Kennedy can be. So to disclose things, where I am is in, okay, right now, I'm, okay, in Bobby Kennedy's corner. Okay, I think that, okay, if Bobby Kennedy could somehow import the dump the corruption campaign, okay, into his campaign, with the potential of that to really change the Congress, he might be able to overcome, okay, a lot of the obstacles that uh, he would face if there were no dump the corruption uh, campaign. Okay, but what I'm doing here is I'm disclosing that I am in Bobby Kennedy's corner. Okay, at this point, I favor him over the other declared candidates. Uh, so I offer the criticisms that I've offered here tonight in a good and constructive spirit. I want to see him win. I think a Medicare for All part of his campaign can add to his appeal, okay, but tremendously, and can help him to win. So
I'm with you on that, Joe. I agree with everything you've said. And I'm so hopeful here. And I'll tell you why. I had someone say to me several years ago, um, someone who's part of, he was high up in our revolution and then moved over to a couple of other different organizations. And, I've always bumped heads hard because I felt like some of the endeavors that this individual was on, they were always trying to derail the momentum that the progressives got. And when one time I just called him up on the phone and I had said to him, I just don't understand. You come to the edge, but then you pull back. And he said, and he was very candid, and he said to me, I'm older than you, and the psyche of the generation of the 60s was broken when they assassinated those brothers, and then they did Martin Luther King, and then they did Malcolm. He said, I don't think you understand. Everybody lost their hope. And for me, when I hear someone who has been working and fighting the government institutions and winning for 40 years, who obviously knows what he would need to do because he understands the office of the presidency. He understands the powers there. His father was the attorney general, his uncle was the president, and he studied that. And he was an addict after his father was assassinated. He was an addict for 14 years and he's pulled himself out of that. And I believe in where he's coming from. And I listen to him wanting to unite the country. I think that on the sheer premise of who he is and what this country's gone through and what he connects in the generations, coupled with his already anti-corruption, anti-capture, anti-security state issue that he's leading with at this point, I really truly have it in this place in my heart that is, I don't know, hopeful and Pollyanna, if you want to call it that. But I think he brings something to the table here that goes across generations that was broken. And it's an opportunity to heal. And I think he knows that. I think he could do it. I think he could get a lot of the Democrats of the old, staunch, diehard, what we would call neoliberal, entrenched voting bloc that has held the majority for so long, which is no longer the majority, right? I really think that if anybody could reach and touch policies and issues that people can get behind, because nobody has to love everything he does, but they have to really believe in big things that could fundamentally fix what is so off the rails. I mean, he is a diplomat to the nth degree. He believes in himself. He's not afraid to talk about the CIA and the security state and all the things that are way, way more terrifying, if you want to go there, than just the damn insurance industry. And he's talking, and people are listening from all corners of the political spectrum, and that gives me a lot of hope. And I'm very hopeful.
Yes, and I'm very hopeful too. Okay, I'll summarize everything you said by saying that I think that he is the real deal,
I agree.
that he has the political skills, he has the capability to make things actually happen, okay, to bring a change. Uh, I'm not so concerned as many people are that he's running as a Democrat because I think he can and will change uh, the nature of the party if he becomes the president of the United States. Okay. I think the DNC will change. The era of the consultants, okay, is going to end. The era of the domination of the professionals is going to end. There'll be a much stronger component of working class, okay, in the party again. It's going to revert, okay, a lot more to the party of the 1950s and the 1960s. And I think that that party can solve, okay, a lot, okay, of our problems. And if it gets to work with a president that has anything like the strength of a Franklin Roosevelt, uh, we could be looking at making America great again. Sorry.
Right.
How about integratable again?
Right. And the thing is, when we're talking about moving to a multipolar world, we need somebody that could navigate that has
And we need
knowledge of how to
someone,
work in a multipolar world.
and we need someone who would be willing to accept that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He's clearly indicated that he would be willing to accept that. And we haven't heard the same kinds of things from Marianne Williamson yet. I think we've been hearing something like it from Cornell, but I'm not sure that Cornell has the skills to navigate foreign policy uh, that I think, okay, that Bobby Kennedy has. Okay. I may be guessing about this, but I think that if Bobby Kennedy becomes the president, we could have Jeffrey Sachs as the Secretary of State,
Amen.
and that would
Woot!
be just wonderful.
That would be
just
amazing.
wonderful. Uh, okay, so I'm very much for his candidacy. I'm very excited about it. I'm very hopeful. Okay, as Lisa says. Okay, we both agree strongly about that. But okay, I just hope that before it's too late, he gets on the Medicare for All bandwagon. I think that can really add to his campaign. So I think if no one else has anything to say, that we can turn to the comments. Would either of you like to add anything?
No, not now.
Okay.
No, I kind of opened up again to RFK when his position where Palestine was concerned, he became educated on
Mm-hmm.
the situation. So that was, that issue is important to me as well. So I
I
was
think
happy to
that
see him educate himself.
I think that that's the other great thing about him is that he says, if I'm wrong, show me where I'm wrong, and I will change my position. I mean, he said that over and over and over again. And how long has it been that we had a candidate that actually not only said that, but then responded to it in a way that was favorable because he got more information?
Yes, I forgot to mention that in the early part of this. That is one of the things, okay, that I really like about him. He seems to embrace the spirit, okay, of inquiry, of critical thinking, and of learning based on critical thinking. And that is so different from any of the other candidates we've had that have run for president, okay, or occupied the office for so long. I mean, one might have to go back to John Kennedy to find another president who had that kind, okay, of orientation. It's really really rare, and it's something we really need because that's the basis of the ability for a nation, okay, to adapt. If you're going to adapt successfully, there has to be a place for critical thinking, for listening, and for learning as conditions change. All we've been getting in the executive branch for a fairly long time is just, simply people who figure out, okay, a particular position, then they rigidly hold to that prediction uh, of that kind of orientation, okay, until they're out of the White House. And I hate that. I hate that. By the time they get to their fifth or sixth years, you can't stand to listen to them anymore because they're not learning anything. Okay?
And they're not teaching anything.
And they're not teaching anything. Yeah. And they're not teaching anything as well. Okay. And I believe he would be the kind of person who would teach things. I think Cornel West would be that kind of person also, to be fair.
Yes, absolutely, he would. I just think that in this situation that we're in right now with this country, with this damn war and the corporate capture of the entire House and Senate to unbelievable degree on so many things, that the only way that we're going to be able to come out is to come out of this literal tailspin that's heading us marching down into World War III or nuclear annihilation, in my opinion.
Oh, that's
Is that
that's so awful, so awful,
we need somebody who knows what to do
and who has
immediately.
the strength to do it
Yes.
and to do it quickly. And okay, I think that right now he is that person. Okay, I think that Cornell might like to do something like that, but as I said, I don't think he has the skills to deal with the Congress.
Yeah, I would agree there. We need somebody who knows how this all runs, how it works, what levers he can pull, what regulatory is about, how it works, why it needs to be funded. Today I saw a video. He parsed out the military budget in comparison to our regulatory agencies and how things are so underfunded and what he would do, what the promise was when we were going to pull out all of our military bases all over the world, and what the military budget was supposed to go down to because of the peace dividend after the wall came down. And he went through all of it, and he said that's what we need to do. We have to do that in order to get ourselves back on track, get our own national security where it needs to be, the focus on infrastructure, which, I mean, I don't know if everybody's aware, but another bridge fell down in Pennsylvania.
No, I
I
wasn't aware of that.
I-95 just collapsed, right on the in the center of Philadelphia. It just freaking fell down.
That's so awful.
It is awful, and he's acutely aware of the fact that that was what the peace dividend was supposed to do. It was supposed to put infrastructure in place. Back in the 80s, we knew we needed to start rebuilding, and we haven't done a damn thing.
Yes, instead, what we did was have tax cuts.
Exactly.
That was really awful. Okay, and of course, we have to remember that now macroeconomics has changed, and there's a new school around, and that school around is not so dependent on taxes for actually getting things done. Okay, so the question is, how does he relate, okay, to that school? Well, I heard the other day that one of his important economic advisors right now is Derek Hamilton, who is one of the leading advocates for reparations, of course, but also for the job guarantee,
Nice.
the federal job guarantee. And I know that Derek Hamilton is on very friendly terms with Stephanie Kelton, okay, and also Pavlina Chernyeva, and is generally close to the MMT school of thought. We also should not forget that one of the chief advisors to John Kennedy uh, was J.K. Galbraith,
Yay.
John Kenneth Galbraith, and his son, Jamie, would be a perfect choice for Secretary of Treasury, okay, in a new Kennedy, okay, administration. And okay, I'm sure that Jamie has contacts, okay, into Bobby, and if he doesn't have them now, then the MMT channel, okay, from Derek, okay, to Jamie Galbraith, okay, also, okay, exists.
Right.
And so if he's not connected up to Bobby now, he will be somewhere, okay, along the line, and is likely to have a place, okay, in the new administration. So that makes me very hopeful also that his administration will be a very intelligent one from the macroeconomic standpoint. Okay, I don't know if the same would be true for a Cornell West administration. Uh, I think it might be true for Marianne Williamson administration because I know she's had some contacts with the MMT School of Thought, okay, as well. But yeah, Robert looks very good to me in that aspect also.
You know, I saw an interview 2 days ago where the interviewer is, I wouldn't call her a mainstream media interviewer, but she is, you would recognize or have seen her before. Okay. She's not like a anchor anywhere, but I've seen her before. I think she might have even moderated some debates. And one of the things that she did was ask him, you know, would you support Joseph Biden if he were the nominee? And he said, and it was really exhilarating for me to watch. He started out and said, well, I don't know. Is he going to rein in what's going on with this proxy war? Is he willing to uh, address the corporate capture and of our agencies and the security state that we're dealing in and the freedom of speech issue that we have? And he just went on and on. And then she pressed him and she said, so if he were the nominee, what you're saying is you wouldn't support him? And he said, that's not what I said. What I said was, what is he going to stand for? And then she came back at him, and for the first time I actually saw a hint of him getting mad, and he said, look, I don't have a plan B. I'm going to win.
Mhm.
Yes, I saw that same interview, by the way.
It was beautiful.
Okay, and I was so happy to see it because if they do cheat him, okay, in the primaries, okay, as you
Mhm.
know, Lisa, I'm very worried about the rigging factor, okay, in the primaries.
Mhm.
If they cheat him, okay, in the primaries,
He's a lawyer.
I so want him to both fight that, but also continue to run,
Yes.
not just vote and support Joe Biden, but to continue to run, okay, as an independent, okay, because I think that he has the power, he has the smarts, and he has the appeal to win, okay, as an independent if he has to do that. And okay, so I don't want him to give up. If he's going to get us all okay, excited, that we give our last dollars to his campaign.
Yeah, we've been through that before, you know.
Yeah, we've done that before, and we don't want to do that for somebody who's just going to fold.
Mhm.
Okay,
I
and
don't think
support.
I don't think he's going to fold, because I'm going to tell you this. He's not Bernie. He's not going to be worried about turning into Ralph Nader. He's way worse than Ralph Nader ever was now. Right? I mean, I don't think that we're dealing with the same type of, oh, I've been doing this for my entirety of my life, and I'm only going to end up hurting my ability to do what I can do in the Senate. This guy's not in the Senate. He's not in the Congress. He's not in the administration. He's not been a politician per se, not a elected politician. He's been fighting the government organizations who have been getting away with murder for 40 years.
Yes.
He's got a different tack, and he's a fighter.
Mhm.
Okay, Steve
I
Wolf.
think so.
Um, uh, Steve Wolfbrand points out RFK has incredible support from independents and also Republicans.
Yep, he does.
And Robert Copeland, of course, raised the issue: will the Democratic Party sabotage RFK Jr. like they did to Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020? I have to say, I think they're going to try, but I also think that Robert Kennedy has the tools to fight back and that he will fight back.
He's not only got the tools, I think he wants this fight, and I think that he's going to have plenty of money.
Uh, okay, so why do you think he wants this fight?
because he's in it already.
Oh, okay.
I mean, nobody else is going after the government for basically undoing all of our First Amendment rights, our right to assemble, our right to due process, our right to just our freedom of speech, censoring us, monitoring us. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out on YouTube. Anything that he's ever done, even his interview with Bill Maher, blew me away.
Yeah, I saw that. It kind of blew me away too.
Really blew me away.
Yeah.
And you can get that asshole online. Oh, excuse me, that guy in line. He can do anything.
Hmm. Okay, so I think we're at the point, okay, of ending this. It's been about an hour and 55 minutes. But thank you for a great stream, Dee and Lisa.
It was great to be here again, Joe.
Oh,
It was great to have Lisa back. It really was.
Hey, just to make a little announcement, I have relocated. We are now living in Cincinnati, Ohio. And
Okay.
very soon we will actually have a house. And look out, guys. We've got a lot of work to do here in Ohio.
That's true. Yeah, Kay's in Ohio.
I know.
Yeah, Kay's
I
in
know.
Ohio. I'm sure she's really happy about that.
Well, she left earlier on, but we'll let her know I'm here.
Okay, Steve says, what a wonderful world we could have. Unfortunately, I don't believe the DNC would ever allow it to happen. And Steve then says, good night. Very good show tonight. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
okay, so good night, everyone. And thank you, Lisa, for popping in. I was kind of hoping that you would.
Yeah, it worked out finally.
Okay, and thank you, Dee, for being here, okay, as usual. Uh,
So we have to hit the like button, subscribe, and share, please.
all right, and please buy us some coffees.
All right, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
See you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Okay, good night, Dee. Good night, Lisa.